Welcome back to Gray Maybe. Today I have a fantastic guest. She is someone that I have watched a lot, been around, danced around, been in dressing rooms with, and she is very special because she has a nonprofit called She Is. It is, she's going to tell you more about it because I don't want to give a little synapse on it without missing anything. I am going to throw out the website right away. It's sheispowerful.org, but the nonprofit is called She Is. She's also a very accomplished dancer, and they also have like a documentary for She Is. It's a whole thing. It's lots of really good resources. She's no stranger to the topic today, unfortunately, but she's doing a lot of really, really great advocacy around this topic. So I'm thrilled to have her here today. Her name is Isabella Grosso, and I'm so thrilled. Thank you for being on the pod, Bella.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited, and it's so great to see you.
I know, you too. And also, like, you're a mother. I just could throw that in there. We're both mothers now. We haven't
Mm-hmm.
seen each other since, like, the last time we saw each other, we were both not mothers. And now we're seeing each other again, and we're both
Mm-hmm.
mothers. So that's a whole change and a whole thing. But please elaborate on if you want your nonprofit or anything else professionally. If there's stuff I missed, I know it's hard to put, someone's body of work that you've known for a long time in a very small intro. So I don't want to miss anything.
Yeah, I mean, you were definitely right on everything. We have been taking a little bit of a hiatus right now, but yeah, we teach dance to survivors of sexual abuse and sex trafficking. We started in 2014. And we shot a documentary because I really wanted people to see the work that we do. Like, dance is so healing, it's so powerful. It's something that really healed me and it really connected me to my body. So we shot the documentary in 2017. It came out and wow, not that long ago actually, but it
Mm-hmm.
took forever to make. And during that time, I wrote a memoir about my life called
That's what
Natasha's Not My Name.
I was like, shit, I forgot that she's an author too. Like, I totally forgot. Yes, because yes, as well. Sorry, go on.
Yeah.
You wrote a memoir. Say it again. Natasha's Not My Name.
Yes, Natasha's Not My Name. Definitely cathartic. I never thought it would be a book. I never thought I would be an author, a writer, none of that. But when I just started writing about my life, it was really healing and connecting that with dance too. It made me want to share my story with others, and because I felt very alone, and it's really scary to feel like nobody can relate to you. But once I started sharing my story, it was very healing. And then during the pandemic, I got published. So it's very exciting. And yeah, I'm really proud of it.
I love that. I'm going to link all that stuff in the show notes. And if you're listening, please check out all those things as resources and also as things to maybe give as resources to other people, spread the word, all that kind of stuff. It'll be definitely in the show notes and linked underneath this episode when you look at it. Okay, so what you mentioned your story. You've written a book on your story. You have this nonprofit that was born out of your experiences. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I was always scared to say childhood sexual abuse just because, I don't know, just really like thinking, oh my God, I was only 5 years old when the abuse started. And it started with, secrets, hiding it from my parents. And it was something that, like, I guess connected me with this person. And um, yeah, it started at 5, felt very weird. I thought it was normal because it's your little secret. And when you're younger and you have a little secret, it's just, I don't know, it's something cool, I guess. I don't know. And from that, it started there, and then it continued through 7 different people throughout my childhood. I thought it was normal, and I didn't know it was abuse until later on in my life when I felt very uncomfortable in my body. That's why dance was very important to me because during that time I was taking dance class. So I felt out of my body during that time, and then I felt reconnected during dance.
It's like you felt
So it
like at
kind of was,
home. It brought you back home almost like, oh,
hmm
yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
And
I
then
haven't
once,
said that in so long.
oh,
So it's
I mean,
weird.
it makes sense to me when you describe it. Like, it makes so much sense, right? Like, and the secret stuff too. Like, I grew up in a family that secrets weren't cold secrets, but there was this air of like, don't tell people your business and keep what happens at home. Like, do not tell anybody these. Don't say these. Don't say that. We have an image to protect, and that's like the image that you portray. And then there's like a lot of bad talking a bit about like other families. So it was like, like that family does that and this family does that, but like don't, like we're better than that. This, and that's like
Hmm.
alcoholism stuff. Like that's what I'm talking about. But it's like, you know, every family kind of has a way they deal with information. And I think overall, most people's families don't necessarily deal with information in a positive way. And so, whether it's secret keeping on any level, because then you're primed for that kind of situation, right? Like, if you're already kind of taught that, like, don't talk about your family outside, or like, you know, I hear a lot of information now when people are like working with children, they're like, how to discuss that you don't like how to describe to your children not to keep secrets from parents and
Hmm.
adults, because that's such a effective tool of of insulating abuse. So, you're 5, you don't, and then this happens 7 other people or times, as you get older, you don't feel like connected to your body except for dance. That kind of brings you back home. And so are you like a young adult at this time? Are you like 18 going out into the adult world? Like, what's the time frame like after these 7 people? Like, where in correlation of your life are you?
When the abuse stopped, or
Or just like as you're going, because you started talking, then I interrupted you because I have a problem interrupting. And then I chop off people's train of thought. It's a really terrible
Oh
bad
my God.
habit.
Okay.
So like you had mentioned, like you started at 5, this happened, and so I think you said 7 different people like within that circle, and then you were taking dance at the same time. So is this as you're kind of growing up and going into your teenage years, or did it stop with the teenage and then turn into something else? Or
Yeah. Okay. So the abuse like continued from like 7, 8 years old. And then my parents separated when I was 12, 13 years old. And when I moved with my mom, and my dad was the one that got me into dance. He was a classical musician. So he's the one that we had this bond together. And then when I moved with my mom wasn't really into that type of stuff. She didn't really take me to class. It was mostly my dad. So when they separated, I didn't dance anymore.
mm,
So, and the abuse stopped, obviously, but I didn't have that connection. So when I would go to school, I felt really weird in my body. I'm like, why do I feel like this? Like, why do I feel so numb? I feel so disconnected, disassociation. That's what I felt all the time. And I didn't really understand why, not until later. I was like, oh my God, it was because of the abuse.
mm,
My cousin at the time started grooming me around 12, 13 years old. And, abusers know who predators know who've been abused. It's like their little radar comes on. I heard this webinar like a while ago. It's like when you see children at a park, a predator sees children at the park. It's kind of like that Sims game where you see like these little
like
diamonds on their head.
bubble
Like,
things above the head, like
yeah.
information above the avatar.
Hmm. It's like, oh, they can spot kids that have been abused. It's like
Mm,
their body language, how they're interacting with other kids. And so that's what I felt like my cousin knew. So
mm.
she knew that something had happened to me, started grooming me. And on my 16th birthday, she said I was going to start stripping.
Mm.
I know I'm like going through this whole like pieces trying to figure it out, but That's why I written my book and my whole nonprofit. Um, so she took me to my very first strip club when I was 15, and she told me when I'm 16 years old, I'm going to start stripping to make money. Me and my mom, we lived in a motel, so we didn't have a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew I was a dancer, so she was like, if you want to have money, then I think you should start stripping. And I didn't really know what that was. I'm like, oh, okay, so you just dance in a room. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
fine. And then she kind of glamorized it and she took me there. And I really looked up to my cousin, like a lot. And I don't know if I keep reminding myself not to say her name. I looked up to her and she kind of reminds me of Sofia Vergara,
Mm-hmm.
just like this beautiful woman. She has this accent. She's just gorgeous. And I just looked up to her. And so I kind of like, listened to whatever she said. And I started stripping at 16. I was a junior in high school. And, I kind of felt comfortable there because of the abuse that I've experienced when I was little.
Right.
So they kind of just go hand in hand with each other.
Right. That's your normal. Like it would be weird if people were like not abusing you at that point because you're like,
Hmm.
this is what I'm used to. And how did like legally that work? Because this is an establishment, and I know that like dancers in clubs like this are usually like 1099, and I'm not saying that all these places are run up and up and up, but like I mean they had to have like lied this like your cousin like I obviously I'm going to like the legality of like how a
Hmm.
business works. Like how did they get away with having a 16-year-old there, a 15-year-old?
Well, I had a real fake ID.
Oh shit,
So,
okay, so they really did it.
hmm
Yeah.
so my cousin used the babysitter's like information. So I took all her stuff. We went to the DMV. I was this person, and she was 18. So we pretended that
So
I
many
was
laws
18.
broken. So many laws
Yes.
broken right now. Like not on your behalf because you are underage, but like holy shit. Okay, so they did it. They legit like that's how they got you in. Okay. And now
Mhm.
like you had to like lie about your age all the time when you're there, I'm sure, right? Like
Oh,
nobody
yeah.
yeah. You're constantly lying about your name, your age, everything. I
hmm
can't like it's crazy because when I think back to when I was a teenager, like I do feel like I was adult minded, like much more mature than my years, much more responsible than most teenagers. And but there was so much naivety that I had that worked to my benefit because I moved out to LA, and like you do all these things that as you get more wisdom you're like that was crazy, like that was something I only
hmm
could have done naive. But I teach teenagers now, and I'm sure you work with a lot of teenagers, and I just look at them, I'm like holy shit, they are so impressionable, even the ones that are
hmm
super mature and super responsible. Like when someone looks up to you, like you can feel how I at least feel how specifically mindful I have to be about how I conduct myself. That because like
hmm
I have to be careful about what I say politically because I don't want them to decide their ideas based on something I would say. I have to be careful what I glamorize in front of them, right? Because they will take it on because they are so impressionable, especially if you look up to someone. That makes so much sense that this cousin
hmm
was someone you really looked up to. Like that makes so much sense, and also because you were so young, and like yeah, that I see. Okay, and now a lot of people I feel like think that sex trafficking is like, someone's kidnapped and they're taken away from their whole thing, and then they're like forced to move around and do all these things, and these sex acts, they're like prisoners, and they're locked in a room and shackled. But there is so much more that actually lawfully defines sex trafficking. And I think your story is like a very common like it's uncommon, like it's
hmm
not like happening, I don't hear it all the time, but it's a common way that is definitely under the umbrella of sex trafficking because you were brought in underage, because you're being worked in a way that is sexual in nature, just because it's a quote unquote legal establishment. I think people need to know this and open their mind to what legally sex trafficking is. So now you're making money. And also, like, first of all, what teenager doesn't want to make a lot of money? Let's be real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's why teenagers get shitty minimum wage jobs. They want their own
I know.
money, you know? Like, they're willing to
Yeah.
work in, like, the worst jobs because they want the money.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, that makes complete sense. So now, did you have to give away any of your money, or were you able to keep it and, like, use it with your mom? And, like, that kind of makes you a bit of, like, a breadwinner in the situation.
No, I would get an allowance. So I would give my cousin the money that I made, and then she'd be like, okay, well, here's $20 for food, and here's, $30 to get your nails done. But she was always taking me and she would just pay.
Mm.
So I
So it wasn't
didn't
even
really
yours, really.
know it was
Uh,
her money, and then she would just give it to me um, for my allowance because she's the one that, brought me into that world. So she has to make her cut of the money. So I
yeah.
never really saw anything until later on. Then I was like, I don't need to give her my money anymore because we got in a huge fight. And I was like, oh my God, I get to keep this money. This money is mine. It was almost like I felt guilty for keeping it.
Of course.
Like I
Yeah.
felt like in the back of my mind that I did owe her still.
Right.
So I really had to train myself like, no, this is my money.
Yeah. Like
And
you're doing
I
something
wasn't,
wrong.
yeah. And I was only supposed to do it until I was 18 years old. And then once I was 18 to stop doing it. But honestly, I worked in a really ghetto club. Like it was in a place in Stanton. I don't think anybody knows where that is.
I don't.
So it was a really, really ghetto club. So she would actually talk shit about the strippers there and say mean things about them. And I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't make sense because I'm doing it. So am I what you're saying about
Right.
people?
Right.
Like, am I a whore? Am I like just all these mean things? But these women inside these clubs were amazing. They thought I was in college. Obviously, I was in high school. So I would come after school and I would do my homework sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And they wouldn't let me finish. They wouldn't let me go on the floor until I finished my homework
Oh,
because they wanted me to have an education. And like,
right.
you're in college right now, so make sure you get your work done. So I would go there, get some of my work done, and then I would go to the floor and work till like 1:30 in the morning until my cousin came to pick me up.
And then you're going to school the next day?
Then I would go to school.
Oh my God.
Hmm. I
Just
like
so sleep
I
deprived.
don't even believe it. Yeah.
Because like teenagers too need so much more sleep, and especially morning
Hmm.
sleep, and school starts so early and then you're up so late. Oh my God, you were really like that's insanity. That's insane. That has to
Hmm.
feel like a whole different life almost. But like, yeah.
I can't even
Gosh.
believe that that was my life.
Yeah.
Now looking back and where I'm at, I'm like, how did this even happen? But it's interesting to see myself at that young of an age and not really judge anybody. Like I
Yeah.
was so pure in this environment where I had to dance naked in front of these men, but I was still innocent in a lot of ways.
Right.
So I
Right.
just never saw them differently. I just saw them, oh, we're all the same, and they're just trying to make money and you know live a better life,
Yeah.
and so it's just interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think there's such like a, well, I could really get into it. I mean, I think there's a huge campaign against women expressing their sexuality. I think that comes out in the form of like shaming and whore stuff and
Hmm.
Madonna whore complex stuff. We could really get into it. But I think it's so great that you were like, I can't have those opinions about these ladies because my experience with them is different. Whatever you're
Hmm.
saying, it's different than my experience. These women are looking out for me. They're really nice to me. They care about me. And like, it's impossible for you to really have a different experience because of how intertwined they were in your day to day there. But that's like it. Also, to me, it points out like that's another grooming tactic that a lot of abusers use is they isolate people, right? And then everybody
Hmm.
else is like terrible. I've heard on a couple occasions like male abusers when they're abusing children will like speak really badly about their mothers or like women that are around them because usually women are a little bit more, you know, perceptive and like involved. And so if you can turn their mothers and stuff away, like if they can get these kids to like think that there's something wrong with their mother, they'll like even more withdraw and not go to them for help. So it's like such a perfect tactic to be like, oh, these ladies they're bad, they're terrible, they're this, they're that, they're gross, they're like whatever. I'm putting words in their mouth, but like to try to control you to like the only person who's safe is the abuser. The only person who cares about you is the abuser. The only, so it's like it makes so much sense. Like it's very like cliche abuser behavior, but of course when you're in it, that's not at all how it feels or seems. It seems like, it might be confusing, but it doesn't seem textbook, And I'm sure like as this is happening, like you're not considering this abuse, you're not considering sex trafficking. Like how did that come about where you're like, or I mean, continue with your story if you feel comfortable about like how you transition out. I think it's also like really fucked up that at 18 you're like, yeah, you're like you're retired. Like now that you're legal, nobody which like I make a joke all the time that like now that I don't get catcalled anymore because I don't look 13. Because that's my slam back to men who are like, obsessed with young women who by the time they seem old enough to tell them off are not interested in them anymore, which is fucking behavior.
Disgusting.
Yeah, it's disgusting. And it's, anyways. So wherever you want to go next in this story.
Well, it's also like, when you strip, like you dress up and, dressing up like a schoolgirl, you don't think of anything like that I didn't think anything of that when I was young. And then now I'm like, that's fucking disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for me, like I would dress like that because I'm like, oh, well, this is what men want. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't aware of it as much as I'm aware of it now,
Right.
um, which is just gross. Yeah, so I stayed in the industry for 10 years
Okay.
because I felt comfortable there. It was my world. And outside of stripping, like I felt like not connected to society at all. Like I just kept my two worlds completely separate. Nobody knew what I was doing, only the women in the club that were my friend. And um, just because of what people would say about strippers.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until late, like as I was approaching, like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, I started to feel really uncomfortable. Customers that I had started to become more controlling. And I think I just started becoming really aware of what was going on and what I was putting myself through. And I was just exhausted and tired of it. I just had a new perspective, I guess, about stripping, and it just wasn't for me anymore. And also like about sex workers too. It's like if it's your choice to do it, then do it. Like I have no judgment at all because I was in the industry, but I think when you're forced into it, that's obviously different. When you were talking about like sex trafficking, it's always 99.9% somebody you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's rarely a stranger.
Right. It's rarely you're getting plucked off the street, but that's what everyone's afraid of,
Hmm.
right? So it
Hmm.
shields accountability a lot of for
Hmm.
people to look around them and people they know. It's very much too like, oh, with if like why are women saying all of these accounts of being raped and abused? Like these are often men doing these things. Some of these men, just statistically you have to know some of these men, but nobody wants to know any of those men. Nobody wants to say or think that they're those men, but
Hmm.
statistically it speaks for itself, right? So it's the same thing I think with
Hmm.
sex trafficking. This stuff is happening, it's happening through people they know, so it's in their family, it's in their friend group. It's not just these like random kidnappings, bad strangers, terrible
Hmm.
people. It's like the person who's at your fucking birthday party or
Christmas
your
dinner.
yes, right? So
Hmm.
people need to broaden their ideas of what that is, and so they can be more properly on the lookout for these types of things. So you did this till 26, and that makes sense. Like, well, I'm guessing around 26, you said like a decade.
Hmm.
So it's like after 18-ish, I think when you said is like you got the money. So that makes sense too, that you're like, okay, cool, now I can like survive and do my thing how I want to do it. Um
Hmm.
Even though that felt like wrong at first, which I think is makes complete sense. I mean, even just like standing up to an abuser on any level often feels wrong. Like
Hmm.
displeasing someone who has violated us feels wrong. It doesn't make sense, but that's
Mm-mm.
how it is. Okay, so Toynsa, you like, I'm gonna get out of this. Like, when did it occur, or how did you find out that like what happened to you was abuse, like throughout your life, and then also like legitimately illegal sex trafficking of a minor and falsification of federal
I know.
documents and like all these.
Uh, she was good. Like my cousin was definitely just this charmer.
Yeah.
Like she can gaslight, manipulate anybody, and she was great at it. Um, okay, wait, sorry. I like totally went to another thought.
No, no, you
Huh?
can go. I mean, that's another thing is how not all abusers are unlikable people. In fact, a lot of
Mm-hmm.
them are very charismatic, very likable, very, enticing people.
Mm-hmm.
People that other people want to be around. I mean, that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the like one of their like good traits, right? So I was asking about, how did you find out that what had happened to you was actually sex trafficking, or even like how did you put together that what you had been through as a kid was like abuse? Because a lot of people don't consider, if they would have recognized it in the moment, of course, then maybe things would have been different. But I've noticed everybody I've talked to, and for myself as well, it takes me a really long time to figure out and label something abuse.
Yeah. I mean, I think obviously therapy really helps me. I mean, I shut that part out for so long, and it wasn't until I started She Is, like, I'm like, oh, well, dance really helped me heal from this thing that I really don't want to talk about. But let me help others. So I actually started volunteering before I started my nonprofit with a nonprofit called Women Empowered. And I would teach dance to girls from an after school program. So that's kind of like where I was like, oh, I really want to do this. I love it. I felt so at home with this. Like I felt like, oh my God, this is my purpose. This is what I really want to do. So then that's when I started She Is. And during that time, I didn't really like to share my story either. It was like I would share it, but there was so much shame in
Mm-hmm.
sharing my story. And when I would see these young girls and they just loved to dance, and I could see them be free and connect with their body, and they would just have so much fun. I mean, we have so much fun when we dance and when we
Mm-hmm.
go to class.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then, but I knew all their backstories. The first nonprofit that I really connected with was Children of the Night, which is in Van Nuys. It's around here. It's a nonprofit where I would teach the class to, and I would see these girls just get excited to take my class, and I would just teach them choreo, and sometimes they would make up their own choreo, and I just fell in love with it. I'm like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
um and it wasn't until I think 2020 where I discovered, like, oh my God, she trafficked me. On my 17th birthday, she took me to Guadalajara, and it was supposed to be a vacation. She had family out there, so we went to go visit. um was like, okay, let's have a lunch date. I'm going to take you to this beautiful place. It's, known for the food, and they have shows there. And I was like, oh my God, amazing. So we went to this place, and we went inside, and everything was made out of Versace. It was gorgeous. And they had this huge buffet, and it was three different levels. And she knew the manager there. And they're like, oh, the show's about to start. It was like an afternoon show there. And so we sit down, and there's this beautiful, like, theater looking stage. And this girl comes out, and she has this Aztec costume on. And she comes out and she starts dancing. I'm like, oh my God, this is really cool. And this is so different. And then she starts taking off her clothes. And I'm like, okay, well, what type of place is this? And she's like, well, this is like a really high end strip club. And I know the manager, and we can actually have you work here. You're American. They they'll love you here and you will make a lot of money. And I was like, well, aren't we on vacation? This was like summer, I was going to be a senior in high school. So this was like the time where I can actually have a vacation because I was working a ton back home. And she's like, listen, you're going to make a ton of money. I really think this is a good idea for you to stay and work. So I said, okay. I met the manager. They had costumes there for the in the back for me. They had hair and makeup, and I ended up staying there. And a lot of people spoke Spanish, and I don't really speak Spanish. And she ended up saying, "Okay, well, I'll pick you up later." I was there till 1 in the morning. I actually did do very well. And it was like me coming home to her and being like, oh my God, I made so much money, even though I felt really uncomfortable. But actually, what got me through that night was drinking
Mm-hmm.
because, like, I didn't have to connect with myself. So I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, I guess this is what I'm going to do. And then the whole trip, I worked every single day and I gave her all my money.
And how
So I
long was
really
this
didn't see a
trip? Like,
penny.
how long were you there?
2.5 weeks.
Oh my God. You're like,
And it was
bitch,
like my third day
you're like,
in
I did not need
Guadalajara.
to leave America to do this. Like,
Yeah.
what? Okay, so so crossing state and country lines, right, for trafficking. But even you being made to work in the strip club, giving your money to another person and being underage is also trafficking. Like that's hardcore trafficking. Like that fits.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like so
I didn't
you
want to realize it though.
yeah. I mean legally that fits the definition and that's what a lot of people I think
Hmm.
don't understand. So yeah, so you got dragged across, the world to be made to work on your vacation as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and the drinking like kind of a segue like did alcohol become like a thing for you because alcohol became a thing for me just and I was not trafficked in any way shape or form but alcohol definitely became a thing for me to tolerate uncomfortable situations, loud noise, a lot of stimuli. I felt like I could access like my true whatever. I don't know, did that become a habit for you or was it just kind of that was how you got through that section?
It was definitely something that got through Guadalajara trip
Yeah.
and being there
Yeah.
for sure. But there was other things like I did drugs, I did ecstasy when I was there
Mm-hmm.
because we would go and hang out with the owner of the gentleman's club after we were finished to like 6 in the morning and just like party and drink and do drugs.
Mm-hmm.
So that was like my whole thing at like 17
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you know
Which like a
I
lot of
just turned 17.
yikes. Yeah. Which like a lot a lot of teenagers like that's what they are like exploring with partying
Hmm.
and all that kind of stuff, but it's not always because they're like having a great go at it, like it's
Hmm.
easy for that to become a coping mechanism for various issues that teenagers are dealing with. I wanted to go back to one thing. So when you had said that when your parents separated, divorced or separated, that you didn't get to go to dance anymore. Did you pick dance back up, or was like even though you're in the club, like kind of like how you continued to dance? Was that it, or was there like a time where you were like, I went back to taking classes or pursuing something more traditional?
Yeah, when I was, I think, a junior, I started dancing again because I could pay for my
Got
classes.
it.
So that's kind of how like I went back into dancing. And then my dad knew that I got back into dancing, and um, it yeah, it was like, oh, this is home. This feels good.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then you kind of did you stay and dance all through? You just kept continuing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually auditioned for Debbie Allen because she
Nice.
opened up her school in 2001. So then I went and studied there, and I was studying with her, and then I was going to the strip club at night.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just
Two,
crazy.
two like parallel but very duality type. Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, And then, like you've been a professional dancer for a long time. That's how I knew you. That's how I met you. Is a lot of us professional dancers infiltrated the nightlife in Los Angeles as burlesque dancers, who were trained dancers, but also were doing burlesque type movement, cabaret type movement to live music. And that's how I met you. And also through the dance community, because we all kind of get to know each other. And also, like, you do firework, which I'm just going to throw that out there too. Like all the,
Yes.
where you see people are like eating fire, putting fire on themselves, dancing around with fire. Like, yes, she also does that. Add that to the resume. Okay, what else? So, as you've gone through unpacking all this stuff, and you had mentioned therapy, was there anything else besides therapy that kind of helped you in this process? Or, was there anything that really didn't help that you want to mention? Sometimes we don't know what helps. Sometimes we know it doesn't help or what we want, but we know what we don't want. So I'm happy to hear that too on the flip side.
What helped was definitely starting my nonprofit and working with the girls. Um, Going to, Thailand and Cambodia and meeting survivors, and they're so young, and just connecting with them and being around them and sharing my story and these young girls sharing their story. It definitely was a huge healing experience for me. Um, and it's interesting because like abuse happens everywhere. I think sometimes people don't think it happens in the States. They're like, oh no, it happens. It doesn't happen here. Like, not my neighbor, not somebody that I know. And I'm like, no, it happens everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
especially out here in LA. Um, so when you connect with these girls, I do this when we're there for 2 weeks. So the first week we get to know them, we dance with them, we connect with them, we just want them to trust us.
Mm-hmm.
So we just really just try to really connect with the girls. And the second week that we're there, I will do where we all sit down in a circle and we start sharing our story. And I tell them the reason why we're here. And once I start sharing my story, they're like, wait, what? This happened to you? I'm like, yeah, this happened to me. And they're like, well, it happened to me too. And
Mm-hmm.
this is what happened. And we just cry, and it's just like this whole other connection that we end up having. And it's really sad to see these young girls experience it, but I see myself in them. And so I think that's really healing for me as well, to see them and just share stories. So I think that's what really helped. What didn't help, um, me, like therapy is great and I love therapy, but I think you need other source of therapy. I love group therapy. Group therapy really helped me because I really didn't feel alone. Dance is therapy, coloring is therapy. Anything that you can do to connect with yourself is really helpful. So I think, yes, therapy is great one-on-one session, but I think opening that up to other experiences that can help you as well.
I completely agree. And I talk about therapy sometimes as a vacuum, like it can become a vacuum.
Hmm.
Like it's really great. And I recommend it to everybody. Everybody, I'm like, get a
Hmm.
therapist. Like, I feel like one should be assigned to you at birth, like a social security card. And then, like, you
Hmm.
could, like, change it out as you see fit, but, like, everybody has to have one, like,
Hmm.
but it can become a vacuum if that's all you're doing, right? So, like, you mentioned group therapy. I love 12-step meetings for that. Like, that's kind of my group therapy, but group therapy is also an option. And I think it's so valuable to hear other people's experiences for, like, what you
Hmm.
say, to, like, feel validated and hear parts of yourself in other people's story, and you can provide that as well. And I think it's really important what you're talking about with helping others. There's a huge part in recovery that I think is helpful in service, right? And being in service to other people, however that is. And there's a lot of ways to be in service. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think that's such an important part of healing and recovery. I have a question. This is a big question. And so it's out of left field too. This is not a good segue for everyone listening. But I feel
I'm
like you,
ready.
I know, I feel like you have such like a good awareness and you're so shameless in telling your story. Why do you think there is so much stigma and shame surrounding abuse?
Oh my God,
I
you
know,
feel
right?
dirty.
Yeah.
You feel like, I mean, still, like I have my moments, especially being a mom. I have a lot of PTSD that I feel really embarrassed about that I don't want my son to feel. And I definitely think the biggest one is like just feeling dirty. I felt so gross. I felt like, ew, I'm that person that got abused, that allowed this to happen. And just like, why didn't I stand up for myself? And I really believe that that's your parents' job
Mm.
is once I told my parents what was happening, they didn't do anything.
Mm.
They didn't. So that's why the abuse continues. If my mom and my dad went in and were just like, oh no, this is not going to happen to you and protect me, I would have had a different life for sure because I'm like, oh, I see my parents doing something about it. But when they just brushed it off, I think that made me feel like, okay, well, I guess this is normal and this is supposed to happen. So I think carrying around that shame, it just makes you want to not say anything and just carry on with your life and just not deal with it. And a lot of people, don't talk about what they've been through. And, that's okay also whenever I never want to pressure anybody to talk about it, but I just want people to know that once you start sharing your story, it just opens up to more healing, more expansion within yourself and realizing that you're not alone.
Yeah. It's got to be so difficult to finally muster up the courage to like tell on someone, right? Like that's how it feels
Mm-hmm.
like. It feels like a tattle, right? Because a lot of these people that people are involved with, it feels like such a betrayal to tell on them, right? To garner the strength and courage to do it and then have people not believe you or not do anything. I personally can't fathom it. The experiences
Mm-hmm.
I had, I never had the balls to, to tell anyone. I also didn't realize kind of what was happening to me all the times that,
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't, and a lot of my stuff happened 16 and older where I really just didn't like, who am I going to tell? Like, like,
Yeah.
but like, that's such a special offense, like such a deep offense. That may, and I can't imagine how survivors move on from there. It's got it has to send such a terribly horrific message. I I'm blown away that you had the courage to do it, and then I'm so devastated that you didn't get the help and the honor that you deserved.
Mm-hmm.
Um but and unfortunately I feel like that's common. I feel like a lot of people tell people and then those people fail them.
Mm-hmm.
Um you mentioned feeling really dirty, and I think that's a universal feeling. The shame, I think, is really heavy. Feeling dirty, feeling shameful. I saw something on your social media that you had talked a little bit about going through pregnancy and having some of those feelings, and then being really conflicted that you didn't want that to be passed on to your baby. And I think that's so insightful, such a terrific mothering response, right? Like how good of a mother you are to be like, like in utero, be like, this is my shit. I'm still working through it, but I'm sharing space right now. I got a roommate. Like, how do I do this? How do I navigate it? If you feel comfortable discussing that, like, will you? Because I think that's something that a lot of people could relate to and not necessarily be able to put in words, but find relatability in it.
Mm-hmm. I think with what is also really healing is asking for help. I think people are really ashamed to ask. And I think for me, I do have a lot of resources and I'm not afraid to reach out, like, hey, I'm feeling this way. I don't know what to do. So I reached out to a few survivors and um, I was really scared because I didn't want my son to feel what I was feeling like you know, PTSD, like I always I'm always like, oh, it's going to go away. Like the more healing that I do, it's just, I'm not going to feel this way. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, I don't know if that's true. I think I keep telling myself a story and I just have to really just, instead of shutting out, just really feel through it. So, you know, when my first pregnancy, obviously, I had a stillbirth, which was really hard. That first pregnancy, it was my PTSD was really strong. So I did a lot of meditation, womb healing. I journaled every single day. I was terrified. And then once I had the stillbirth, I blamed my abuse. That was the first thing that I did. I was like, it's because I was abused. Because people who've been abused are dirty and they don't deserve good things in life. Because you were picked out to experience this horrible thing that happened and they took your innocence away. So you don't deserve good things. I don't think that's true now, but that was something that I was really holding on to a lot. And I had so much guilt. And, it was like, okay, well, I guess. And they want to prescribe me antidepressants. And I told them in the hospital, like, there's no way that I'm going to numb this. I really need to work through this. And antidepressants isn't something that I want to do. Like, I know what I need to do, and it's just heal. Like, I really have to go through this to come out even stronger. And when we got pregnant again, I was doing, what's that therapy called?
EMDR.
EMDR. Yeah, I did that. And then I would just at home, if I was feeling something, a memory, I would just do the little butterfly tap and I would just breathe because I just knew that everything that I've been through, I just didn't want a band-aid. I really wanted to heal and work through this. And I knew that he was going to come back. It just wasn't the right time. But I do feel like it's interesting how all of a sudden we just blame the abuse. And we shouldn't do that. This is something different. This is something separate that I experienced. And I just knew, like, okay, well, this is just another thing that I need to work on and I need to heal. And, with the PTSD, like, I still feel it now, but I have a better way of working through it and just really grounding myself and know that I'm safe. And then I will tell him, you're safe, you're strong, I'm going to protect you, nothing bad's going to happen to you. Like, doing that also makes me feel good, and just knowing that the things that my parents didn't do for me that I wish that they did, I'm going to do this for him. And I'm going to teach him the correct language, his body parts, the woman's body part. Nobody can touch this. If somebody touches this, you say no, you run, you scream, you tell us. Like, there's no secrets. Like, I'm already trying to implement that to him now, so he just knows. And yeah, I think that as a community, like, we need to know that it's okay to talk about this to our kids and not be ashamed and like, no, I don't want to teach my kid anything. But
Right, a shame because we're uncomfortable with the conversation,
yeah,
or that we haven't worked through all of our shit, essentially.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think everything you said was just so incredibly remarkable. So I'm going to repeat a bunch of it back because I want people to really focus on it. When you say you reach out to other survivors when you're having a moment of feeling a flashback, this is so important in recovery, in any kind of recovery. I don't know why it's so magical. I don't know if it's because it shines a light, and anytime we go dark, it just needs, like, the more light you can shine on something, shadows can't thrive, and, like, or whatever it says, like, you're only as sick as your secrets, right? The more you keep it inside, the sicker it kind of makes you. So I don't know if there's some kind of brilliance in telling someone what's going on. And it's not necessarily that someone needs to offer advice or suggestion or anything. It's just like, just hear it. Just hear it. Once you say it out loud, it's like it gets out of your head, and then it, like, is set free a little bit. It doesn't mean it doesn't come back. It doesn't mean that it's forever, but something magical happens when you share something with someone safe, obviously. Like, not everyone is the person to share information with. So like you said, it's important to reach out to the right people. You find your people. Your people are people who have been through something similar that you know you can count on to give that information to. And then you mentioned PTSD and it never kind of going away. And I think that's so poignant. Things that we deal with or have recovery from don't go away. They might kind of like go dormant. You might be doing like really good, but like there's flare-ups, there's like little like relapses, and it's not of any fault of your own, like, oh, I'm weak so I relapse. It's just like, no, like this stuff is how it works. It comes up, it flares up almost like an autoimmune, and then you got to like do all your stuff, but it doesn't necessarily go away. Just like an autoimmune doesn't go away, it kind of like can be dormant. You can like live a very functional life, but it's kind of like always a little bit there to kind of keep tabs on. And also moving on to your experience with with having a stillborn, like the automatic blaming of yourself makes so much sense. I think any woman in that situation, or any pregnant person in that situation who has that experience, would blame something. Oh, it's because I exercised too much, or maybe I ate fish that one time, or like and the abuse is such an easy go-to, right? Because it is so destructive in people's lives. Like, it makes so much sense that would go there. And I think like a lot of people I hear when they've had miscarriages or things, like the first immediate thing is like, what did I do wrong? And it's like, nothing. You didn't do anything. But it's like impossible not to take that kind of responsibility in the moment, right? You have also talked about going through these emotions, right? Like in the hospital, when they offer you the antidepressants, like, first of all, like, you're so hardcore. Like, you are so hardcore. Like, to know about yourself too, to be like, no, I need to grieve this properly. Like, I can't put a Band-Aid on this right now. And I'm not saying that, antidepressants are a Band-Aid, or that people like should be able to tough it out. I'm just saying that, like, you were like, let me try to move through this, right? Like, there's no way around it. There's no, for me, putting Band-Aids on it. Like, let me try to move through it. And walking through it is going to be like walking through the worst fucking shit ever. But knowing, you having the wherewithal of how to get through these things, how to work through it, you have to go through it. I think that is so smart and so insightful, especially for people who are listening who might be on the verge of trying to work through something, that it's like, there is only through, and it is like walking through the worst firestorm you could imagine. So thank you for all of that, because I think that is all so insightful, and it models very similar paths to a lot of the recovery that I very much believe in and advocate for. Okay. I have one more question.
Okay.
And of course, anything else you want to add. So, and I can't believe like I'm at the one question, because you've given so much like gold nuggets of recovery in this episode in such little words. Like, it's so compact. You're very compact in your effectiveness. So on the podcast, I say that we don't give advice, but we give suggestion sometimes. So I always like to ask, do you have any suggestions for anybody who might be suffering right now in this realm, or in any realm really? But
I think the big thing is that you're not alone. I think I felt so alone for so long, and there was no way for me to share my story. And now I just think, no, you're not alone. Somebody's experienced something like this, whatever it is. It doesn't necessarily have to be my sexual abuse. It can be any type of thing. And I remember in high school, I would just be in my room and I would sit by myself and I would just like cry, because I felt like I didn't have anybody to be there for me, to support me, just to hold my hand and know that everything was going to be okay. And I think That is not true, that there is somebody out there that you can reach out to, and no judgment, even reach out to me. Like anything that I can do from my experience and help others, like I'm here for it. I believe everything that I went through was for a purpose. It was for a reason, and it was definitely to share my story and to let everybody know that they're not alone and that I'm here if they need advice or if they want me to hold their hand and let them know that they're going to be okay, that I want them to feel that way. I want them to feel good. I want them to know that um, don't feel ashamed about anything, and just, I don't know, just it's really hard, and I think that we have a lot of shame, but I just think that you're just not alone.
Thank you. I love it. And this is the thing. Her DMs are open. My DMs are open. Seek people that you can tell have a bit of recovery, Like it can be
Hmm.
hard if you're kind of in the new part of like trying to find your way through recovery. If you're finding people that are kind of in the same place as you, it can be helpful, but sometimes it can like get worse, like cuz you like kind of like trigger each other. But look for people who are actively talking about their recovery, because usually they have enough capacity to like kind of monitor when they can give you that kind of help. And it also like just the relatability and be able to kind of be there to hear you know your feelings and thoughts or experiences. But the DMs are open. I really relate to being a teenager and crying in my room, because although I didn't have the same experience as you, I had that same experience of just like being alone, crying in my room, and being like, there's no one I have to relate to. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think you and I were in those positions where social media wasn't really a thing, it wasn't around. So there wasn't a way to like look up people who have already been through something like this, like, or a podcast, or some an organization or anything like that. It just was not, you didn't have access to that kind of stuff. So I feel like we were probably particularly isolated in a way that today's youth and people aren't exactly. So I really relate and have a memory often of being a teenager in my room crying. And I often look back on that memory and I'm like, man, like I got to be who that chick needed. Like I have to,
Hmm.
like, that's one of my kind of goals in recovery and stuff surrounding and recovery Jason, is like be who I needed as a kid. Like that's that's my that's the bar.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate you saying that. um it's interesting, the message of like don't feel ashamed or dirty or any of those things, because like when I listen to you, I don't think you should feel that way. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
but it's hard when it's us, right? So I think it's really powerful when you say that stuff, because it's like, I don't think you should be ashamed of that. I don't think you should feel dirty. I don't think so. It's really powerful to see it, because then I have to admit that it's got to be the same for me or for someone else. So it's powerful in you saying that. Isabella, thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for giving me your very valuable time as a new mother right now. Like, setting aside an hour, 2 hours is kind of an eternity in these moments of
I know.
where you're needed. So I really, really appreciate and value your time and your ability to communicate everything that's happened to you in such a concise and compact way, and so shamelessly. It's just so powerful. And so I'm really, really grateful for you doing this today. And I know that people are going to really relate to this.
Well, thank you for having me.